Welcome back, Rabbi Dr. Eliezer Brut. It is a pleasure to be with you once again. Last episode got lots of feedback. I don't know if you want to share it. It's prepared to share yet, but people were fascinated by the conversation, whether Rav Chaim was a Paisik, and when he was writing that nothing that he writes is a Liba de Hilchasa, we should paskin like it, and the history of other Seforim that were written with that type of warning was a fascinating conversation. And we're going to follow up a little bit on that and a little bit more on Rav Chaim responding and writing so many letters to thousands upon thousands of people. And we're also going to have something a little bit contemporary, letters and conversations that Rav Chaim had back and forth with Rav Dov Landau, Shlita, current Rosh Yeshiva in Slobodka. So we're looking forward to this. We once again thank our sponsor, anonymous sponsor for season 2 of Rav Chaim, which I'm told this is the second to last episode. That's what I've been told. And then we're going to have some more topics in different areas. If people have ideas, they're welcome to write in. Sponsorships are always available. Rabbi Brut spends incredible amounts of time preparing, researching these works. So please reach out to myself at shweidm@ou.org or Rabbi Brut at eliezerbrut@gmail.com. Once again, if you want to be added to any one of his lists, Rabbi Brut sends out fascinating material specifically before Yom Tovim. Purim is coming up. Today is Yom Kippur Katan, Erev Rosh Chodesh Adar Aleph. Rabbi Brut, I'm sure, is already preparing what his Purim send is going to be. So feel free to reach out and be added to that list as well. With that, too long of an introduction, here is Rabbi Brut.
No, not too long. It's fine. You have to listen to me for much longer, so it's perfectly fine. Okay, so basically the last episode we spoke about, we moved into Reb Chaim Kanievsky's vast letters that he published, that ended up getting, some of them are getting published or are being published also in the works, and we discussed the question that many asked in his lifetime, and people spoke about during the Spadim, is why did Reb Chaim Kanievsky spend so much time every day answering dozens and dozens of letters for years and years. I still have not found when he exactly started answering so many letters daily, but at one point it seems it was over 80 letters a day. So the question is, why did he feel it was so important? And the complaint was this took away from him writing other great works, such as he began his work Der Chachma on Kachim. And because of this, he was not able to finish it. He told this to people. So, as I said already last week, this was a question that Reb Chaim Kanievsky was asked. Like everything else that he was asked, he was also asked this. So we don't have to speculate why Reb Chaim Kanievsky felt so important. And he basically said at different times, he said these three answers to other people, but the person that we quoted from was Rav Tiger, who was able to have a very close relationship with Reb Chaim Kanievsky over a period of 20 years. So one was that Reb Chaim Kanievsky held at some form of Talmid Torah to Talmidim, because we know Vishnantu Levanecha ALL Talmidim. He wasn't zeichet. He didn't have a stellar as Rosh Yeshiva or Rosh Kehilah. So this was his way of being Marbitz Torah through these letters. Okay. Another thing was, we said that he was mentioned was he wanted to give. Because it caused, by getting these letters, the senders would get Israkshus and feel very good, and they would be inspired to learn further. And a third thing was simply Rachmanis. They send them letters, and they want. It was some type of a chesed type of thing. Now, so these were the three answers that Reb Chaim Kanievsky said. So what we spoke about in the previous episode was, amongst other things, is that there's that I was trying to locate where this comes from, and my suggestion was, we spoke by Richos, is there's a piece from Reb Chaim Volozhiner in the Hagdama to Nefesh Chaim. Reb Yitzchak Volozhiner brings down that his father used to tell him all the time, that you're not created for yourself, but to help people, whatever you're able in your strength to do. So I spoke about that concept. Now, And I gave some sources and in the Volozhin world about this Nakuda. So I want to just mention very briefly, not to go full force into this topic, but just to mention some other pratim about this. One of the books that I've quoted numerous times throughout the shiurim is the book about the Chafetz Chaim written by his son Rebbe Leib. So interestingly enough, a Gadol that my reaction every time I read the book of Rebbe Leib on his father, each time I get more and more mispilus to the Chafetz Chaim. And one of the things I took away from when I read the book again and again is, you see, the Chafetz Chaim was Ish Maisa. What does it mean, Ish Maisa? He wasn't, let's say, Mishnah Berurah, right? So he wasn't out there to go put out, he's going to work on Shulchan Aruch R Chaim, and he's going to put in all his Torahs and everything. No. He felt there was a tremendous need. He actually tried to hire people or to encourage other Gedolim to put it out. No one took the bait to do it, so he had to do it himself. And he realized it, and he felt there was a need for this work at the time. What that is, actually in the middle of working on what was the need exactly, what he felt about it. He deals with it a little bit in his introduction. And he went ahead and he goes and he devotes 25 years to put out this massive work, Mishnah Berurah, which today is unbelievable what the pay is from this work. Now, what happened is he held that this is important. But on the other hand, he doesn't go and put all his Torah on R Chaim into this 6 volumes. It sounds like it would have been much, much bigger work. What was important and what was necessary is what he put together. And he even told his son, Rebbe Leib, different times, it's not about to show off your Torah and to just stam right and everything. It has to have a major Tayela. So everything was what was included in the sefer. So basically, the Chafetz Chaim saw a need, and he went ahead for the tzibur, and he went and gave himself fully 25 years. Again, it's not 25 years of 24 hours learning just this. He was involved with many other things. But when you see all of a sudden other things the Chafetz Chaim did, when a different need would come up, if it was necessary, he would write a sefer about it. He would get involved. He would travel. He would go. He was ish. He didn't just sit. Not that there's a problem if someone does just sit, as we'll see shortly. But the Chafetz Chaim was a doer of things, and you see this certain type of musig of this nakuda that I'm showing from Reb Chaim Volozhin. Now, okay, this is the Chafetz Chaim, but interestingly enough, as I was looking about this, so I actually forgot about this, is the Chafetz Chaim. There was a conversation specifically about this between the Chafetz Chaim and his son Rebbe Leib. Rebbe Leib was, it seems like from this book, was a tremendous Talmid Chacham. We've already discussed, he was involved with the writing of the Mishnah Berurah and all different things, and he lived with his father a lot of the time. And so he writes at one point in time when he was younger, he was Isaac a lot, but b'chesed u'b'inyanei tzibur. He was helping this, and there's actually reasons behind what was going on, and that one could find when you read the book. And the Chafetz Chaim told him, it's not that you're being Isaac in it too much. What do I do? Says the Chafetz Chaim. I write Seforim. If I see there's a problem, I write Seforim, and then through that people get better. But be'emes, and then Rebbe Leib writes in parentheses, which is what I quoted last week from Reb Chaim Volozhin, that even though Reb Chaim Volozhin says such a thing of doing for other people, but if you look in Ruach Chaim, there's a sugya ma'ikatan. Reb Chaim Volozhin tells to the sugya ma'ikatan, which says it has to be things. If it's things that's efshalasas alidei chayrim, ein lachacham levatel limudoi. So he was sort of giving his son Rebbe Leib, who was being Isaac in tzarchei tzibur, which is a tremendous thing. But he was giving a musar that you have to be careful when, and that it has to fit into halachic guidelines. Okay, so all I'm saying is Reb Chaim Kanievsky, L'Kula Alma, even though he was doing this, we're going to see actually shortly through what I'm going to say in the next say today, was being Mekayim the Chafetz Chaim Ara Seif, even with this musar that he was giving Reb Leib. Okay, we'll get to that in a second. Now, interestingly enough, I saw that the Torah Tamima writes about his father in the Makar Baruch that the Aruch HaShulchan was also against certain Rabbanim, he doesn't say who, that he felt they were being too Isaac in Tzarchei Tzibur. Okay. L'maisa, interestingly enough, we know different Gedolim, they were very Isaac in Tzarchei Tzibur. Again, each Gadol is its own story and needs to know what the parameters are, and each one was able to paskin and know what they were doing al pi dal chelkei Shulchan Aruch, and then some. L'dogma, Rebbe Akiva Eiger was Yedua, was very involved daily in a hospital. And this is a whole fascinating discussion when it comes to talking about Rabbi Akiva Eiger. Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, we know from accounts, he gave up a lot of his own learning. He was a Goin Olam, but because he felt the tremendous necessity, what was going on in the world at the time, and so much so that when it was brought to his attention about someone that was just sitting and learning the talus that's filmed the whole day, and he was learning, and he said no. Rabbi Yisrael Salanter wasn't impressed. He was saying is that sometimes there's a nakuda of worrying about the dar. So Reb Chaim Kanievsky, according to what I'm trying to bring out, is this is his way. There was a necessity for this, so he felt, yes, it has to sacrifice his svarim on this expense. Okay. Now, I've quoted a bunch of times, numerous times actually, the Gadol Minsk, the book about the Gadol Minsk. So I quoted it endless times. I was very into it already through the inspiration of Reb Zelig Epstein, always hearing him. Reb Zelig Epstein used to always quote these in schmoozing and conversations. That was written by the Sefer Meir Halpern. Meir Halpern, I mentioned, was a tremendous Talmid Chacham who was the tutor of the children of the Gadol Minsk. So, through this, he spent a lot of time in the house of the Gadol Minsk, and he had many conversations with him. So at one point, they have a series of conversations, and it seems that he was telling him, he was giving him sort of like complaints that people were saying that you're too busy, you only answer Shilas and Halacha, you're not involved in the Tzibur, you don't go visit even the Talmud Torah, you don't go give them visiting them to check, to make a Reishim on the Talmidim, and he has a few pages, fascinating conversation back and forth between him and the Gadol Minsk, sort of saying complaints that people in the city of Minsk, it's not a small little shtetl, it was a big city, had about this Gadol, who was the chief rabbi of the city. And the Gadol in Minsk answers him up beautifully and talks about it. He says, yes, it's true, there is a Meir de Kazach of, we find throughout Chazal, of being Eisik and Tzarchit Tzibur is an important thing, but it's not for every person. He says the problem is, how he writes this out, one of the fascinating things about this sefer is that this author, as I just said, was tremendous Talmid Chacham, so he knew how to write unbelievable. Anyway, so he says it's like this. People, and this is a Musar Haskell for people Ad Hayom. People read a lot of different things about a lot of different people, or they hear different things a lot of different people. So they envision themselves a perfect Rav that's able to be multi-talented and have all types of skills and he's able to do everything. He's the best in learning, but he's also the best in this, the best in this. He's also the biggest in... And Minsker says this is far from true. It's not realistic. You want a Rav, and he said, Lamashal, when the city of Minsk, they took me, they knew, they checked into me. I didn't hide anything. They checked my place where I was before. I was who I was. I was a Paisik, that's it. I wasn't a person that's going around to be involved with all the different things. And then he also stells through the Gemara Ma'ikatan again. But anyway, the point is, it's a fascinating conversation, well worth one reading the pages about it. I'm not going to quote all the aspects. But you see here, again, that there's this nakuda, different gedolim, and different people even have different jobs in Klal Yisrael, and there's definitely room and a necessity for people that are Eisik and Tzarchit Tzibur in the highest order. But Reb Chaim Kanievsky was doing it in his way he felt the necessity for the Tzibur. But there's two other aspects, and that's why I feel it's not only the nakuda of Tzarchit Tzibur, or chesed, as he said, or feeling bad for the people, and everything is like this. Number one is that which Reb Chaim Kanievsky said in these answers is also this is his way of being Marbitz Torah. So there is a question, and this question has been asked and discussed by many people. Which is as follows: people, it comes to talk, and I already mentioned something a little bit about this, which is as follows. Sometimes people are not sure what career they should take. Should they remain, let's say, learning in Kehilah, and they get a job. They get a job offer to become a mechanech of whatever it is. So they feel it's going to be a tremendous sac, and they're able to. Obviously, this is talking about people that financially at that point they're still able to continue learning, but they feel. But the main concern is they take the job, it's going to come at a sacrifice for their own Torah learning. So I mentioned already in the previous episode, Lamashal Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, he was learning in Kehilah for 19 years, Ram and everything, and then he got this offer to be a Stellar Rosh Yeshiva in Kol Torah, and he had a big shaila, should he switch career, so to speak? And he wasn't sure, and Lysi was told yes. So, but part of the question, which many Rabbanim have asked at different times in their lives to their Rabbanim, so to speak, is what about what about this? I'm going to go down and learning because I'm now have to be Isaac in preparing for my Talmid. So there's a concept which I don't even know how many people say it, but the one Marmakam that I have that says it often is the Hafla'ah. In his Akdama to Masechtas Ksuvos, in Chumash Panim Yafas ALL TORAH, a few times he says this, and that is, don't ever worry about it. A Rebbe gets so much from a Talmud that he can't even imagine that even though it appears at this point in time, you might be thinking, oh, I'm going down. No, it's unbelievable what you are getting from being a Rebbe. This is what the Hafla'ah writes. Kedai to see it inside in the incredible Hagdama of his on Ksuvos. He also says it in Panim Yafas, I think in Parshas Chazarah, and other places also where he deals with this thing. I once said it turns out that the Panim Yafas, we don't even know the Panim Yafas was a Rosh Hashiv for years and years and years, but we don't know most of his Talmidim, but we do know one Talmud of his, the Chassam Sefer. If you had the Talmud known as the Chassam Sefer, it definitely, there's Yesh Mashu in these words of the Panim Yafas of actually happened. Now, interestingly enough, there's a letter published in Darkei Chaim from the great Gadol Reb Chaim Yaakov Naftali Zilberberg. So this is a fascinating work, a yid that had to do with all types of Gedolim, the Beis Halevi, others. And Bekitzer was asked in a letter, which was a similar type of question, which was asked. By the fact that it's going to affect your shamayim or your shleimus and learning, should you be concerned about this? And he said, Chas v'shalom, no, not at all. And he writes beautifully in this letter. Also, he was giving aids, I think, to his son about pursuing some type of career. And he also said the same type of nakuda that I'm quoting from the Hafla'ah. I'm not the same wording as the Hafla'ah, but a similar type of nakuda, which is, don't worry about it. Hashem Yisbarach makes it that with VI Talmidim, you might think you're going to go down, but you're not going to be going down at all. Interestingly enough, just two other Marmakaimis on this. There's a shmuz, the Tribuna Rav said such a thing also. People have to know this. From the Talmidim, you gain unbelievable amounts. I also saw recently in Shmuel Orbach, he was nervous when he got his Steller to become a Rosh Yeshiva, if it's possibly going to go affect his learning. I think he even had a conversation with it about his wife. He said, Lamaisa, they say that it's not going to affect it. Okay, if it's true or not, I can't say now. But now the question is, but what is there any more to this nakuda with this concept of from Talmidim? And so I feel, and this is what I feel is even more in the galus of these letters of Reb Chaim Kanievsky. On one hand, someone looks at these letters, and there are so many of them. You're like, okay, what's the point of these letters? Because a lot of these, what do I mean? A lot of these letters are asking simple questions. They're not. They could be a bacher, a 12-year-old bacher, whatever. A 10-year-old bacher had some question. He's learning a thing, Mishnah Brura. He could ask his Rebbe, and Reb Chaim Kanievsky is taking the time to answer him. The answer is, I think, like this. And this is built on another nakuda, back to this book with the Minsker Gadol. There was a complaint to the Minsker Gadol, another such complaint that was voiced, and it was like this. Why do Rabbanim, back in the day, and even today it's negay, why do we find that they write Teshuvas? They write Teshuvas to people not in their cities. They're hired to deal with their cities. So what are they doing going and answering questions to people outside that they don't know, they never met? What are they doing getting involved? Let them be busy with their city and their city alone. Then another similar complaint was people walk in and they see the Rav, he's learning Tyrus, or he's learning Aveilus, or different things that are not Negelah. He's like, chutzpah, make sure you know the Nashim and Azikin, or the R Chaim and Yanim. What are you doing learning all these things? What's going on here? As that complaint they had to the Minsker Gadol, obviously this is fascinating. This person had such a tremendous relationship with the Minsker Gadol. He was able to bring this up. I don't know how many Rabbanim today, if some guy, a Baal Bas, and their Kehilah would start talking to them about these things, how it will go over. But anyway, the point is like this. The Minsker Gadol said, what are you talking about? That's the whole point of a Rav. That's how a Rav remains a Rav. He has to be Isaac in all areas. That's how he learns. That's how he knows how to answer. You want him to know the answer for everything? That's how he keeps his skills going. And by the fact that Gufa, he's learning even Kachim and Tyrus, because Kol HaTorah Kula is Nageya to answer everything. It's not enough to learn R Chaim and just know R Chaim. as I quoted already in season 1 with Reb Chaim Kanievsky, with the Reb Chaim Volozhiner and Reb Chaim points this out, how you paskening aguna shailas from places that you never would think. That's what we see from the fascinating stories with all different Gadolim that we have throughout the generations, that their knowledge in Kol Torah Kula was what helped them, and it wasn't enough that they just were an expert in, let's say, R Chaim. Now, so this is what the Minsker Gadol said, and he said, furthermore, this is an akuda in the Teshuvas is a way that they keep in touch. It's like a speaking and learning, and I'm gonna add to this in much more in this shortly when I discuss the letters between Reb Dov Landau and Chaim Kanievsky. But one more nakuda over here, and like this. To add to this nakuda with the Minsker Gadol is like this: the best type of Chazarah one will find it was what Reb Chaim Kanievsky got. Means this: Reb Chaim Kanievsky had a seder, we discussed this a million times already, called Chayvus, that every day he was being he had a set amount of material that he would learn, and he would be Messiahim all areas of literally Kol Torah Kula every year. So now, how does one keep on their toes and make sure that they know it? The best way is by being asked all types of questions under the sun. Now, you'll ask a Rav, an honest Rav, and I'll tell you, how does he make sure that he knows Hilchos Pesach? What the answer is, because he spends before Pesach a few weeks preparing and learning Mishnah Berurah. It's not enough. It's known. There's a tremendous Yat Shmaya. I might have mentioned this in the past. The Tziv Lashal says it. Pesach Frank goes with this, that a Rav has tremendous Yat Shmaya when he's answering a Shaila. But there's another Nakuda. When a Rav is constantly tested, so his best Chazarah of Pesach is when he's asked the whole time all the questions. So first of all, a Rav, he wants to make sure he's keeping his job. He wants to keep his Kahal happy. He wants to give them proper answers. But all this is helping. It's a Keseder Chazarah. So Chaim Kanievsky, every day he's getting, let's say, 80 to 100 questions. He's literally Chazering Keseder tons, because it became known after a certain period of time, especially. You could write to this person about anything. So he's being tested, so to speak, about everything. So it's not only it's similar to what in the Minsker Gadol's answer was, which you have to read very carefully how he writes it out beautifully in this book on the Minsker Gadol. There's obviously different knetches, but the point is that VI talking and learning and being asked questions, that is the best Chazarah. I once remarked a comment, and that was like this. At a certain age, yeshiva guys are very proud of themselves that they know how to learn, and they tend to mock or make fun of their Rabbanim. What I mean, their Rabbanim, their high school Rabbanim. They get to Beis Medrash, they think they're world's greatest Lamdanim. They're already learning a year or two Lamdas, and their high school Rabbanim have no shaykhs, or other Rabbanim have no shaykhs. And the point is like this. So I put it in perspective. I say like this: in many high schools, what happens is a Rebbe, besides for preparing the material, he has to spend a lot of time because he has to break it down for all levels of the class. I'm talking about a good Rebbe in high school. So there's different levels of boys in the classroom. But more than that, what happens is, and I made a simple cheshbon from my own experience, there's a test every few weeks. The amount of times the Rebbe had to say over the material, every sugya was at one point the Minhag Chazon was like 30, 40 times. So he's chazering all the raid, everything, the blat, the Gemara, Rashi, Taisus, he's being asked on every single Eis Rashi. So now Chaim Kanievsky, on a mass scale, is getting tested on a crazy amount of time. Yeah, no one's checking if he's right or wrong because we assume that he's right. But the point is, so Chaim Kanievsky didn't even have a problem to answer these letters. Yeah, we're all nervous. Chaim Kanievsky, he's not putting out his work on Kachim Tires. The answer is he was able to put out, and I'm going to demonstrate in Mirz Hashem in future episodes, in certain Seforim, you could see this uniqueness came from he was being asked such questions because they knew, who else could you ask? You ask, I don't know. So he took the information that he got from his learning and he was able to apply it and think and use it for everything. So he was also gaining this nakuda, similar to what I'm saying, building off the Hafla'ah and others. Ultimately, he gained also, and that's why I feel is that he was Pasha Chazarah, was Chazarah. He was able to answer questions. Now, this is a nakuda, this is my chiddush with Reb Chaim Kanievsky. It could be I'm right, it could be I'm wrong. I'm right that it's a true concept bichlal, but if it's true for Reb Chaim Kanievsky, who knows? And the point is just to bring out the limud for us also, that sometimes people are nervous. you learn with a guy that's not at the same level as you, especially in yeshiva world, is always a thing. The guy you're learning with has to be a mitzuyin and whatever. And the point is, no, adarab. A lot of times, if you learn with a shvacher guy, as long as the person's interested in learning, it forces you to have to explain the things, and you get a much greater clarkite in the thing. This is a Kabbalah I actually have from my father. He used to always tell me, get a chavrusa. It's better to get a guy that knows it less than you, because it's going to force you to have to make sure to know what's going on. And you have, and you're, if it, and this, and we see, so this is an akuda that I'm taking out from Reb Chaim Kanievsky with these letters. So it wasn't only that he's doing a chesed, and it's not only this nakuda of that it's a chelik of being Marbitz Torah, but it's an akuda in the Marbitz Torah of the Hafla'ah, that don't worry about you thinking you're going down in levels, you're going to remain just fine. Now, there's another nakuda which relates to all this, which relates to this nakuda the Minsker Gadol, which was like this: how do Rabbanim write all these teshuvas to other people? It's sort of a chutzpah, let's say. So my claim that I've made in researching teshuvas svarim of achronim is as follows. On one hand, we find a Rav has asked the question, so you can answer him. All of a sudden, you see, if you look sometimes at some teshuvas, they're pages and pages long. What's going on over here? Not only that, so in certain teshuvas farm you'll see they're not even about a halacha l'maisa question. It could be about a sugya in kachim. It could be about a sugya in R Chaim. It could be pages and pages. What's going on here? So my claim was, and others make this claim also, is in those days a rav was a rav in, let's say, a small little shtetl or something. He might not even had anyone to talk to in learning. So his way of keeping up in learning and discussing learning was through letters. Today, the world is a whole different way. The world is. There's a telephone, there's emails, there's all different things. The speed that everything goes, it's hard for us to imagine. But in those days, there was no telephones. When someone wrote a letter to another person, it took forever till you got the response and everything. So there's a term in the academic world, republic of letters. But basically, the way Rabbanim kept up and built and remained top of their game was gufa through writing letters. So a Kehilah wants their Rav to be writing letters, because this is a way of him speaking and learning and keeping his skills. Now, with that in mind, so Reb Chaim Kanievsky, okay, so you could say he's answering these guys these letters, and maybe it's keeping him, not maybe, it's keeping him up. I said because it's keeping on his toes, because he's getting all these exotic questions also. Okay, on one hand, that's true. Now, I'm going to go back now to discuss way back. Reb Chaim Kanievsky, we know, was born in 1928. There's a fellow B'nai Braker who's today one of the great Gedolim of Klal Yisrael, Reb Dov Landau. He was born in 1930, so he's only 2 years younger than Reb Chaim Kanievsky. B'li Ayin Hara, he's 94 years old. Now, what's fascinating is he lives in B'nai Brak, and I believe he lived in B'nai Brak at the time. Around 1958, which would mean Reb Dov was 28 years old. Now, it could be really the letters started earlier, but they start a correspondence which spans from 1958 till 2008 of letters. What was published was 123 letters between these two giants, Dov Landau and Chaim Kanievsky. Now, in recent months, actually, Rabbi Shua Inbal, a prolific writer of today, a contemporary writer of today, a tremendous Talmid Chacham, put out a work called Echad HaYavram, Sefer Zikaron L'Ran Chazanish. And in the back, he has a whole nice section of hundreds of pages devoted to the Chazanish and his base medrash, and he has a whole section about Chaim Kanievsky and Dov Landau on these letters, and he has interesting points as he learned through these letters, different chaps, things that he was aimed on in the correspondence between the two. Ayin Sham, this book recently arrived in America, even though I think on the internet it seemed like someone attempted to put it in some type of chayrim, but anyway, a very interesting book, which I'm working on different aspects to discuss about this work. But he has a few pages devoted to this kasher between Reb Dov Landau and Reb Chaim Kanievsky. Okay, so as I said, this begins in 1958, and just to give a little sense of what we're talking about here, there is what causes me to be nispal when I picked up these letters. The letters came out in 2022 while Chaim was still alive, Volume 1, and then afterwards Volume 2 came out. I start looking at these letters, and I'm just, Chalisha said, das not stam. You literally want. I once heard that when Dov Landau and Chaim Kanievsky met, and they met. So the letters, it's an interesting thing. They met. They live in B'nai Brak. They don't live so far from each other. But the people, the way someone once told it to me years and years ago was they just spoke in Marmakaimis. They'd say, "Oh, Gemara that, that Gemara this," to answer. Like they knew the Ramazim that each one was referring to, and you just watched two giants ping pong back and forth, Kol Terakula. But okay, that's a story that I heard. All of a sudden, now I see these letters, 120 letters, and you see this is exactly what's happening. We're talking about. I'm not talking about Dov Landau, Rosh Yeshiva of Slobodka. They're handling in Yeshiva Shemesechtes. We're talking about over here Zram Kachim Tyrus Be'iyun. We're talking about Diyunim on paid letters, not one ha'ara that he opened up a Tosefta. No, a bunch of ha'aras Tosefta Erechin, a few letters on Tosefta and Baba Kama. This is crazy. I'm saying, how many people even? Okay, people know that Tosefta is found in the back of the Gemara, but that's usually about it. I'm saying, look at a Tosefta, forget about. Then you have in one Diyunim on the Tyrus Kaihanim. Okay, again, this is going back and forth between the two people. Normally, it's famous. Dov Landau writes very bekitzer. In these letters, he really writes out what he's saying. And sometimes Kehilah says, I mamish don't understand what he's saying, but the letters are incredible. L'mashal, to see two Gedolim handling a Radak and a Ralbag and somewhere in Tanakh, that it's also not in the regular standards of what you're learning. Okay. Of course, they're both heavily influenced by the great Chazon Ish. Many handle rise in all different Chazon Ishes in all his farm. Tons and tons of aras back and forth about Mishnah Berurah, which again in Bnei Brak is a very important sefer based on the Chazon Ish, which we've already discussed. But then you have like exotic things such as the sefer Ma'aseh Torah of the Gra. All of a sudden, it seems Dov Landau got a copy. He had a few ha'aras, and he's like, "This doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense." So who does he write to? Who even knows what the sefer is? We're talking about the Brisa Ma'aseh Torah. Now, if you listen to season 1, we actually devoted a few minutes to episode to discuss this. But most people, I don't really think know anything about the Ma'aseh Torah of the Gra. But Dov Landau is learning it, and then he has questions on it. Who does he ask? Kehilah, he has pages of answering it back and forth, and they don't lose up. At one point, Reb Dov starts out with a Ramban and Chumash, a Taris Kaihanim, he moves to a Me'arik, he ends up with a Targum Onkelos, he ends up with a Targum Meyuchas. Reb Chaim Kanievsky writes him back, handling again. It's just simply Chalisha Sadas to watch these two giants going back and forth and just turn the pages without even knowing what they're talking about. One is just blown away to see just what's happening over here. Okay. Just to pull out a few very quick nakudas from these things is like this. One is Reb Dov wrote him ha'aras on his Seforim, on Talmid Akra, Nachalis, on the various Masechtas Ketanos, Kiryas Melech, dozens of ha'aras on Reb Chaim Sefer on the Rambam, Nachalis, and also dozens of ha'aras. And Reb Chaim answers them. And what's fascinating to me also is that it's not Reb Chaim writing Kain Loi. In some of them, Reb Chaim is writing real answers, a few lines, discussing, handling even a Diak and a Mishnah Berurah, or anything, or the other things that the sugyas come up. And it's just, you're watching, and it's like, with such a, like, not, it's like, it's not, again, it could be, I'm reading into this last sentence I'm about to say, Chaim is like, ready, whatever you want to just throw at me, I'll have an answer for you. But it's an incredible thing. You also see Dov Landau, the Michel, throwing out a sefer Tishbi from Reli Bacher. I found that fascinating. Okay. Anyway, as I'm going through the letters, L'mashal, Chaim Kanievsky was working on Shaina Halachas. So who does he ask to look through the letters of Shaina Halachas? He asks her, not the letters, the Chibur Shaina Halachas. He says to Reb Dov, could you please go through Eruvin, one of the most complex areas of R Chaim? And Reb Dov does do so because of the request of Reb Chaim Kanievsky. Okay. At one point, Reb Dov writes Ara about the Shaina Halachas, and he says that it's a very important sefer, and I also am going to be kveiyas to go through it. It's a tremendous chus that you have by writing this sefer. And this is on the Shaina Halachas, which we've spoken about also. That some people are like, okay, what's the big deal? What's the great story behind this sefer? Why did Chaim Kanievsky even write it? Okay. So this is another nakuda that was came up in these letters about the Shaina Halachas. Okay, 1 second. Fine. Now, so the question is like this: what was going on? Why was he writing these letters? The answer is, Reb Chaim Kanievsky asked him to write them. Reb Chaim Kanievsky was appreciative of this, and so much so that at some point it seems Reb Dov didn't want to write. So Reb Chaim Kanievsky says, "Please continue writing. It's unbelievable. And again, what I think is because this nakuda of it was a talking and learning type of thing. So when you talk, basically at one point he says, Rav Chaim Kanievsky writes at the end of the letter, Chas v'shalom, you think that your letters are a tircha for me? Adrabba mechtav l'simcha. Your words are so important and nice to me. I answer you right away. And Keseder, one will find Reb Chaim Kanievsky saying this to him early on in their correspondence as it began. About these letters. Okay, I just want to share with about 3-4 things from these letters. Hold on, I just marked off the pages all messed up. Sorry. Let's see. Okay, in one letter, Reb Chaim Kanievsky says to Dov, this is Parshas Bereshis in 1960. Okay, so he writes something like this: sorry, you have to be Michel me. I got your letter between Yom Kippur and Sukkot, and we already know in Chazal, Vayikra Rabbah, that you have to be busy. Lekachtem b'yom harishon shein yemei tirda. And then he says, "B'chal moed yev shalicht tov." I couldn't write because I guess he held even writing Torah not to write during Chal Moed. This is Reb Chaim Kanievsky response. L'chein lo yanti by ad ke'esh yetzani gam midei safek yom tov sheni, which is not a nakuda ki yadua. Reb Chaim Kanievsky alpi nakudis was Noig Safik was Noig Yantif Sheni L'chumra. Okay, so this is just Derech Agav in a letter. You see Reb Chaim Kanievsky writing and excusing himself. Why is he not answering him right away? Okay. Then when he writes to Dov, he writes, Yedidi harav hagoyin charufu baki sinei va'ikar haram. This is in 1960. This is we're talking about way back. Okay. Then L'Moshe Dov asked Reb Chaim, "There's a mind to do it." He says, "Adarabba, please keep on sending these letters." And he did. He wrote 123 letters. He would go through all the Seforim Reb Chaim Kanievsky, whether it was Derech Emunah, and as I said, different Seforim, and they back and forth about this. Okay, I'm just going to hold on. I have over here marked off. There's too many different things to quote. We're not going to give 5 shiurim just to discuss all the fascinating things in here. But let me just see if I was able to find. Another time he writes, I'm wondering why you're being natzel that you're writing me these letters. I already wrote you kama pa'amim shemichtav etzli l'oinig v'simcha v'adarabba mini u'minei testay shmaitza. Again, the same concept. Okay. 1 second, but I'm being repetitive. Wait. Then, at one point, it seems Dov wrote a bunch of aris about Talmid Kra, and then he says Dov apologizes that he's writing a little sharp. So Reb Chaim says, "What are you talking about?" Adarabba, ikar simchas ha'Torah hu ha'masa ha'matan ba'alacha u'chashem shein partzafeim doimin u'minei testayim shmaitza v'ani sameach ma'oid from your letters. Okay, so basically, yes, you wrote to me, and you don't have to apologize. This is how learning is. Okay, so now just to be messiah with 3 nakudis from these letters, 3 more nakudis, Torah-dika nakudis takeaways from these letters. One was Davening Vaskin. So interestingly enough, in the course of a correspondence over here, Chaim Kanievsky writes, "What about Davening Vaskin?" So Chaim Kanievsky writes, Dov Landau as follows: "Emes yeshlit star tuva." It's Shabnei Torah ein nizarim lispal vasikin shu chiyuv gomer laharba paiskin udas rifa ramam nikron avarian ufrat mishakam bevadai mitzvah sheispal vasikin. Basically, Chaim Kanievsky is saying the great importance of davening vasikin. V'yisi l'maranzal shloi chash klal l'tfilah b'tzibur rakash agia azman hiskol shmena eser. Then they handle this Mishnah Berurah that they were handling. But then in the course of some other letters, he also discusses again about the importance of Davening Vaskin. I think Reb Dov wrote him something about it, so Reb Chaim responds about this nakuda. Okay, so this is one such letter that another fascinating derech agav reading through these letters. Okay, another interesting thing was as follows. I'm reading the letter, and Reb Dov has a question in Hilchos Aveilus. There was a einon, and the person wanted to know if he could sit on the floor like an avel. So Dov is asking Reb Chaim Kanievsky, what does he know about it? Okay, says Reb Chaim Kanievsky, Kfar don b'zeh Reb Michel v'hevi b'shem pei mem lahakel ayin sham. So for me, this was a fascinating find, and I'll explain to you why. What's going on? Who's this Reb Michel? And the answer is very simple. Yechiel Michel Tukitchinsky. And why is this a fascinating nakuda? I'm just going to be mekatzer, just say 2 points over here. Many, many years ago, I was looking into the luach of Rav Tukitchinsky as a halachic work. Do we rely on it or not? So a friend of mine told me that his father had learned in Slobodka, and he heard b'shem Reb Dov, that Reb Dov Landau said, you want to know what to do? Look in the luach and do the exact opposite. So here I found fascinating. Reb Dov is asking Hilchos Aveilus Shaila to Reb Chaim Kanievsky. What does Reb Chaim Kanievsky say? Look, that Kfar Don B'Zeh Reb Michel Tukitchinsky, the author of the Gesher R Chaim. Fascinating maramakim for me. And we see that even now, what's so significant is Rabbi Yechiel Michel Tukitchinsky for Reb Chaim Kanievsky is a person not so pashas she should be quoting. We know he's the mandama, he's the paisik that argued on the Chazon Ish with the dayline Shaila. And here we see he's saying, don't worry, look at it. Now, this is obviously part of a great story relating to the relationship between Bnei Brak and Yerushalayim, the Luach Veretz Yisrael, Rav Tukitchinsky, the Chazon Ish, the newer generation of the Chazon Ish, Talmidim, and the Yachas to Rav Tukitchinsky. This is a topic I'm actually in the middle of working on, which we'll discuss shortly, a tiny prod about it. And then to the Messiah. Reb Chaim Kanievsky, a lot of times they'll be handling something, and not a lot of times, but sometimes also Reb Chaim Kanievsky, something. It's in Yana de Yaima. So says Reb Chaim Kanievsky, Purim. We just had Purim, so I'm going to tell you ha'ara relating to Purim, and this is what I will be Messiah with this ha'ara is like this. He was answering Reb Dov, and then he says, he answered this to Reb Dov on Tainus Esther. So he says like this. I was asked a question, which I was always wondering, and is as follows. We do Aseres B'nei Haman, we say B'neshima Achas. Why? So everyone knows, because they all died at once. So first of all, what's this nace or not? What's the big deal that they died at once? And what's going on? How do we even know this? But more than that, what's this thing of doing it B'neshima Achas? We don't really find this anywhere else. Okay. It says Reb Chaim Kanievsky, a nakuda in this story. He says like this: from the fact, if you look at the psukim and you read the psukim, Eis Parshan Das Veis Dalfan blah 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 blah, right? Saras Bnei Haman, it sounds like they were killed one after the other, but we know they really died at once. Now the point is, it's impossible to say 10 names at once. So you have to write it one after the other. So how in the world are we masaking this nakuda to be madgish that they taka died at once? This great nace is by saying a neshima achas. So it comes out that, says Reb Chaim, that sometimes, and we find this other places also, that the trup and the tamim is what helps understand something. And it's not likuva, but there was no other way to get, so that's why it's only found over here, such a thing of neshima achas. Why? Because we want to bring out this nakuda that it was taka that they died all at once. Now, what's the significance of why they died at once? That we have to discuss in Masechtas Megillah. But anyway, the point is, here was a thing that Reb Chaim Kanievsky was handling something with him. So he right away says, oh, it's Purim. Let me just tell you ha'ara that I came up with for this question. Okay, in a different letter, which is also around Purim time, where they were already handling a Targum Sheni on Megillus Esther, says Reb Chaim Kanievsky, okay, when Retchen Vegen Targum Sheni, let me tell you ha'ara and Targum Sheni. The Kitzer, the point they're trying to bring out is like this. Reb Chaim Kanievsky had this correspondence with Dov Landau, which spawned years and years and years. Earlier years, it was much more often. Later on, there could be at one point there's a gap of 10 years, and this is probably when they both got much, much busier and they didn't have the time. But this is a way that I'm claiming is to see if someone wants to see Chalisha Sadas of Kol Kula of Jews, even Dov Landau is still alive today in Bnei Brak. This is a Yid. We're talking Kol Kula, everything with Reb Chaim Kanievsky, but it's also a nakuda which is behind Reb Chaim Kanievsky to letters. This is a way of talking and learning, or handling and learning, or keeping one on their toes. So Reb Chaim Kanievsky appreciated Reb Dov's letters, and I'm not saying that Reb Chaim Kanievsky was happy and was running after letters because there were letters that he didn't answer for whatever cheshbonos he had. But the point is, as a whole, these letters, even though we might think that they take away from his learning, I'm claiming that they kept him on his toes. And just to mention, it's known Reb Chaim Kanievsky had these tests, which we might discuss a little bit more at a later point. But the point is, these tests would be these type of things, like weird questions, like you look at the Masechta, how do you know this thing in the Masechta? And the answer is, his mind kept him being trained. He was basically chazering his Torah, his chayvus, as we called Keseder Yom V'Layla, through these questions and through these dealings with people.
Incredible, fascinating information. One point, perhaps you alluded to it a little bit. Reb Chaim Kanievsky and Dov Landau were probably within like a 10-minute walk of each other.
Yeah, but maybe even less. That's what I'm saying. That's what I find so interesting about this whole thing. It's not like, okay, they both didn't have telephones or use telephones. I understand, but they're young. If they started their correspondence when they're 75, okay, we say that we're talking about they started this when they're 28 and 30. They're able to walk. So the answer is there's a nakuda over here, which I didn't go into, which I might go into, is there's a nakuda in writing, and that's another nakuda by Reb Chaim Kanievsky is a very important thing, but we'll deal with it at a different point.
And there's probably someone who could track with today's historical information that they met, when they met, how they met. They probably were meeting each other all the time also.
Yeah, I as far as I know, they did meet. Even in the letters, there's times, we met, we discussed, and there's times in the letters you could see it's because something they had a conversation about. So they met enough times. And you have to also understand, we today, me at least, the way I'm growing up is by me, Reb Chaim Kanievsky was not accessible pretty much for most of the time that it would have been again. And you watch all the videos and there's thousands of people, but there was a time not so far back that there wasn't anyone driving him crazy. He was able to sit on, saying there's pictures of him, he's 80, sitting at a regular table in a public place learning. There are such things. So we're talking about when he's 28, and it's Bnei Brak, as big Bnei Brak as today we saw last year, but saying it's not what that was not the Bnei Brak of when they're 28 and 30.
Okay, you want to show a sefer?
Yeah. So one thing, just because I alluded to it, is sometimes a work comes out which is a game changer in understanding a lot of different things, and that goes back to something I just spoke about a few minutes ago. I mentioned the Yechiel Michel Tukitchinsky. So everyone knows he's famous for the Luach, and Rabbanim know him from the R Chaim, and others know him from different works of his, and he's famous for being in the Dateline Shaila, the person that argues with the Chazanish. Anyway, a few months ago, right after Sukkot, a beautiful work comes out, 2-volume Teshuvas of Yechiel Michel Tukitchinsky. Teshuvas on Dalech Chelkei Shulchan Aruch, also including topics on Nizmanim, Likutim on Zram, and these type of stuff. Tons of psakim, things, correspondences of his with Gadolim. And some of the letters over here are fascinating. There's fascinating things, and one of the fascinating things about these volumes is you get the behind the scenes of the development of the Luach of Eretz Yisrael. Also, besides all the many other things, there's psakim of the Aderes, psakim of Shmuel Salant, that this is only Makar, he was able to know the Aderes, and other different fascinating materials about different controversies involved. There's also some chiburim that he started to write, the controversies relating to his Luach. All could be found in these 2 volumes, these 2 beautiful volumes called, it's called Shut Hagramit. It looks like this. 2 beautiful volumes available in Eretz Yisrael and I believe in America at this time that just came out. And because we just spoke about them, we were able to kill 2 birds with 1 stone.
Okay, thank you very much. Looking forward to what could possibly be the closing episode, the finale, season 2 of Reb Chaim Kanievsky.